I'm starting this, the sun is coming straight in here. Okay, today I'm going to continue on. It was about Moms America. Was it Kimberly Fletcher, I think her name was? Because I've spent, I forget how many past days now, writing some letters again, because this did get Congresswoman Mary Miller and her husband, who's a state congressional member in Illinois, Chris Miller, into my outreach campaigns, as I guess is the jargon. And I guess I'm going to get into the. So last time I did read on education with the Fourth Reich, from the rise of the Fourth Reich, and this it'll get into propaganda, which, you know, what we teach children in the schools is to a certain extent another form of propaganda. I mean, it's the same thing with your religious institutions, which, you know, if it's based on the fundamentals of the Quran, Torah, or Bible, it's all basically the same. And we do have a problem with the, you know, and I don't go to church just because I don't agree with any of the institutionalized religions, whatever the different factions. And you know, opiate of the masses is you know, what Karl Marx called them, but unfortunately the secular community has taken the you know, the human rights development community is the new church, if you will, Roman Catholic Church, perhaps, if you want, and their propaganda, these affinity groups and the NGOs, and are the outlets, if you will, in the same manner that the religious institutions have their local churches and their outlets for their propaganda, because it's all a bunch of really BS propaganda. I mean, I was blown away by one of this bias presentation that was done during the recent Foxcroft alumni Zoom reunion this past weekend. I was like, oh Lord, yeah, I don't know, yeah, yet more. So anyway, I'm going to go into that, but I did want to cover some different things that had to do with that bias. And I mean, I had said I was going to talk about Moms for America and this Kimberly Fletcher. I'm going to jump over that a little bit quickly, because she's just another example of these NGOs, affinity groups, propaganda producing social media platforms that, you know, have some basis of veracity and some of the stuff they say, but the people who, their founders, the people who are within these organizations, no research, no, you know, they have this mission, but what they do is nothing to do with their mission. Promoting women's rights, for example. Well, no, that's not what they're doing. They're using that as a guise for an NGO to produce a platform that will promote their particular faction's agenda. And, you know, they give them all, this is why they constantly have to close down an NGO and then they'll start it up under another name. Ethel Kennedy seems to me on the left that really started that with the Robert F. Kennedy human rights organization that she in '68. And, you know, that is one of the points of the death of the liberal class of the Kennedy family, you know, just totally party hardy, this frat culture that the IMF, World Bank, and everybody else in Washington has embraced, as has the prep schools and the Ivy League colleges, and just cashing in on the entire, you know, game from start to finish. And that's what I'm going to look at also with Foxcroft and where they're going. But there is this is in my letter to Chris Miller, hopefully, because what's coming out more and more and more, you know, the fundamental problem of good governance in Washington. You've got the Republican Party who's in power and the Democratic Party who's in power. And all of the different people within these parties who work career, Democrats and Republicans, or the elected officials, it's all about jobs for them, more and more jobs for them, managerialism. We're going to need more and more experts. We get more and more experts, and the more experts we get, the more that we're going to find the correct solutions. Where you're just, you know, convoluting the problems and the discussions because nobody knows what the frick is going on, and that's why they keep on voting in these puppets into the elected positions. And what was Trump? What was Obama? What were the Bushes? What was Reagan? I mean, and it goes back, but starting at the Reagan era, it really becomes, you know, so overt, it's not even funny. So, you know, you can kind of see the Koch brothers and their friends, the DeVos, the Fourth Reichers, they're on the right. You know, and pushing the right-wing extremism, or rather pulling it, and the Kennedys and the, you know, those are obviously the whites. And you have to understand that when JFK came in as the first Catholic president, that was as extraordinary, at least in my mother, who's Irish Catholic, you know, as much as a coup as Obama coming in. I remember when she, you know, and I just think it's so wonderful that the Americans have voted in an African-American president. I was like, oh. I mean, how racist are you? Stop being so hypocritical. Oh, my Lord. See, I know all of these people, or enough of a sampling of these people in the United States, France, Spain, England, and globally to know what hypocrites they are, and also what their dialogue publicly is versus the way they actually live their lives. No, I mean, these are the movers and shakers of the world. That's one of the reasons why I came up with Global Expats, because I do know so many of these people, and I want to see I mean, one of my big things was educational reform that I wanted to do with global expats in terms of social issues and injection of our influence in these arenas. And I go after the American, French, and British educational system with knowledge. I mean, okay, I was only not even 2 years in the British system, rest of the time in the American system, and my children were in the French system, and I was extremely implicated in their the early years, particularly after Madrid and what we were facing coming out of Bogota. I had to assure a real income, not like everybody was, oh, you should do this, you should do that. I'm like, if you would stop opining on what I should do, maybe look at your own spending habits and, maybe listen to what I want to do and why I'm choosing to do this rather than what you want me to do, like opening a restaurant. Yeah, I want to open restaurants. I want, that is, believe me, that's a whole other can of worms of, the responsibility of the how shall I say this, those who do event planning, restaurants. These are social places that people come to gather. You do have an influence. Now, this is why PJ Kennedy, he got into the taverns in Boston when he was launching his grapple up the ladder of success, which trickled down to his family. And that was made off of, the tavern industry. At the end, that was prohibition. And so, but he was smart. Like he mainly divested and got into the importation, which is probably less of a risk than the distribution part. Those are the ones who are going to get nabbed by the local cops. Because in the Bernardier, so we saw this with the war on drugs. Even Maxine Waters, you should be ashamed of yourself. It's even on your Wikipedia page that you know about how the CIA was involved in bringing in the drugs to get the cocaine, the crack cocaine epidemic amongst the urban Black men started. So there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle that, yes, you do, you need a ruling elite, wives and mothers, because that's, they rule the social world. Now they've all opted out and are trying to cash in. And the financial world, and everybody tells me, well, you're just stupid and you're going to end up living on the street in a tent because you didn't get with the program and figure out how to monetize all of, what you're doing. Now, I did figure out how to monetize what I was doing. And that's why my ex-husband destroyed the project, colluded with the web designers to have it, cyberjacked. I mean, that's a whole, still, I see those guys in court. That'll give me the testimony. Yeah, we did it, in collusion with your husband. Well, thank you very much. That's what I've been trying to get since 2009. I've known it was going on, but of course I need the proof. And if I can't, if the court systems are a mess, of course I can't get the proof. I mean, oh Lord, monetize. I really figured out a way to monetize. $1 billion a year instead of sitting there parroting and espousing the propaganda of whatever different faction is going to fill my pockets. No, this is one of the reasons why, like, no, we make our money from advertising. We are totally independent from any donor money. Turning the Expat Wives Clubs, which is a volunteer organization, and charity work. I was on the board. Believe me, this is the French diplomatic community. They're in as much hot water. The Ministre des Affaires étrangères of the French as the American State Department. Now, I do believe I'm getting more, you know, I mean, these expat wives clubs, the women there are so stupid, of course. They don't realize what's going on. It's the same with the women in the domestic violence industry. Got this reminder from one of these ladies about her mother's custody conference is coming up in May. I should be there. I went to give my speech and I found out, oh, you people are just as like Davos, World Economic Forum, IMF, and IMF World Bank Spring and annual meetings. I attended the spring one. I only needed to attend to go, okay, I got the picture. And I also got the picture of what you people are really doing over there at the IMF. Yet, you're so much into your propaganda campaigns and drinking your own Kool-Aid. I mean, the HR people, Gina Paoni, I remember when she came in and she's like, you know, the only thing that you need to be concerned about is your career and grappling up the ladder of success. I was like, oh my freaking God. Of course, nobody in these organizations, it would be the IMF, World Bank, UN, because it's a, you know, closed little club that when they retire from there with their generous pensions and all of their kids and wives had gone to the exclusive boarding schools and Ivy League colleges to amass, you know, PhDs and MBAs that they don't do anything with except utilize to cash in if they have brain, and the rest of them don't do anything with it. Saw this with the Mark White Lewis case, Institute for Capacity Development. He's the director of global partnerships there. But I'm all over the map in demonstrating how it's not only the white male supremacists like Mark White Lewis, Robert Powell there, or some others, whatever, a whole slew of names, but how the white supremacists are just brown nosing and schmoozing with the brown, the black, and the yellow supremacists to advance their different agendas. And I won't tell on you if you don't tell on me type of, you know, it's not see something, say something. It's like, I won't tell about your stuff if you won't tell about my stuff. And because that's how it becomes a protection racket, but it is. So I really have, since the Biden's report on domestic violence extremists, I have kind of been focusing there. And okay, you guys have produced yet another report that's given me a whole slew of things to work with on how you guys are gaslighting everybody with all of this stuff and utilizing this report. See, they're going to target with this, and this is why I put it on the table. Oh yes, this is very good. Okay, let's go after them all. But see, that's not the agenda. These are the Democrats. So this is only going to be utilized as a tool in attacking any targeted people, but it'll only be the targets that they want to bring out. It's not about going after the terrorist cells in the United States that are on the right as much as the left and all over the freaking place. And you know, another thing, and this gets into the domestic violence industry, they only want to promote that the physical and sexual violence of men is actually domestic abuse. This is until you actually, you know, property damage or attack on another person for and bodily harm, or the intention to do that, then it's not terrorism. Yeah, it is. Goes a lot deeper than that, because you have to stop what is propelling these people to become violent. And the education that they've had, socialization throughout their lifetime, that are producing these extremists. Because that's where you need to nip it in the bud. This Rittenhouse thing is really such a witch hunt against this child. Now, he shouldn't have been there. Now, my question is, where were his mother and his father? 17-year-old kid. Now, my kid, I would know if I had been with my children. I mean, this is one of the things that I thank the Lord, because in Spain, I'm dealing with the same crap and extremism stuff there as in France, everywhere in Europe, as I am in the United States. Different shades of gray, but same can of worms. And you know, I just pray every moment of my being to keep my children safe and get me back to them as soon as possible. And while when it's time to pay the piper, and all of these people have been playing games with me, well, my family, friends, or in places of work or housing, and they got to pay the piper, and they come crying to me about, I'm going to be like, it is what it is. You've been telling me that for 15 years. Well, now the shoe's on the other foot. And you got to be held to account for all the crap that you're covering up. It is, I mean, this is why you get these, people who go through this, they grab on to some extremist religious stuff and hang on to that, that sends them with that rhetoric that's being introduced there to such anger and backlash, and they do become violent, because it just that the amorality of everybody out there, and screw you, and if you don't like it, tough shit for you. We'll see that, women coming in, or it is basically women coming into the workforce. We can show you men, we can be just as tough as you, and even, tougher. Well, guess what? So can I. But when I do that, it is not to dominate and control somebody else. It's to step in and take charge of a situation that everybody else is creating chaos out of, and say, you shut up, because I know them and I know their agenda, And I know, you know, I listen to what they actually say. So I'm gonna say, don't bullshit me, because that's bullshit. And you said the exact opposite yesterday or 5 minutes ago. I mean, yeah, my sister even, she was like, how'd you remember that? I have the memory of my father. And which is another thing that people don't like. And a lot of people, oh, she's so upset. She doesn't have a great memory. Yeah, because I don't remember stupid bullshit. But believe me, I'm listening and watching every moment. And anybody who hasn't made the mistake of believing that that is not true and that I'm just some bimbo sitting over there with nothing in my head has made a extremely dangerous miscalculation. See, all of these entitled kids, you know, this is one of the problems. All of these idiots, you know, pampered and, you know, Princess Victoria type of, we got to stop, you know, educating our girls to be like that little princess in a pea that doesn't even know how to tie their shoes. And this makes them somehow, and this is the role model. I mean, this is just a parasite. And this is why the ruling elite women who you know, buy into that, whether it be Queen Elizabeth II, Meghan Markle, Princess Diana, all the same mold, different colors, different forms, but same mold. No, that's not a good role model. Not at all. I mean, Kate Middleton, so she wore a recycled coat. It's one of these pop-ups that comes in all the time. I'm like, how do I disable this? Because I'm getting tired of it. She wore a recycled coat. See, this is a thing. You know, you cannot wear the same thing twice. I was like, I don't know anybody who has a pocketbook like that. Even the you know, the wealthy ones. And really, if your pocketbook like that, you're doing some really illegal stuff. I mean, yes, well, I only have one of them now, but, and believe me, I want to check from my lawyers. Well, we can add inflation in there, a couple $100,000. Now, I didn't pay that for my wardrobe because my mother taught us to have expensive taste. And expensive taste is not just throwing money. Because if you want real, you know, if you want quality, you're going to have to pay a little bit more. But that's where it becomes important in knowing what quality is. Now, I mean, I go to the discount racks all the time. I look, you know, how is the thing put together? The hem, the material, every little detail. Oh, well, this, because I wish I was a better dressmaker. I mean, I can do basic hems and basic things. I'd love to learn more, but and I even take things. I got one dress there, $5. I mean, it's a knot. I made it into something, a knockout. You couldn't even wear it before. But it looks like I have a really expensive wardrobe even now. Because most of the real, you know, my good clothes, I had to leave. This is why Foxcroft with, oh, they're welcoming and they're contributing to something about Afghan girls, these poor Afghan girls who are fleeing with only a backpack. Like, excuse me, I fled Spain with only one suitcase and I've gotten raked over the coals in my own country for the past 13 years in Washington, an hour away from you guys, with you sitting there partying. So your charity work, sorry, I'm not buying that. Because if you are really concerned about women and children, you'd be giving me a voice instead of your propaganda stuff. So the executive summary of the Biden report on domestic violence extremists. So the IC, I forget who the IC is, the group put this together, which is the bigwigs at the CIA, you know, there's a CIA, FBI, the different, you know, national security, there's about 5 or 6 of them in there. So the IC assesses that domestic violent extremists, DVEs, who are motivated by a range of ideologies and galvanized by recent political and societal events in the United States, pose an elevated threat to the homeland in 2021. Homeland sounds pretty Nazi, they right there in the rhetoric. Enduring DVE motivations pertaining to biases against minority populations and perceived government overreach. Perceived, I love this. They throw in this perceived stuff all the time. It's just perceived. I'm like, no, I got evidence. It's not just perceived. Will almost certainly continue to drive DVE radicalization and mobilization to violence. I mean, I was just listening, it was even CNN, I think, one of the reporters saying, oh, wait a sec, what the Biden administration is doing, expanding executive authority. And the you know, I'm criticizing them for that, just like I criticized the Trump administration. This has been going on for a long time. It's slowly, so you know, of course, because if they did it the golpe, you'd have a public, you know, no. But you do it over decades and decades and decades, and it goes unperceived. Because you got a bump of bimbos and bonzos driving your train or you know, sailing your ship or whatever the metaphor you want to use. It does matter, you know, who the wives and mothers of a society are. But you know, the ruling elite, the ones who are providing a role model, and that's what legitimizes the monarch. And that whole queen and king stuff of, you know, no, there's going to be order here in my kingdom, and we're all going to work together. That's the cohesion and the legitimacy, and we're going to dress properly, and we're going to speak properly, and we're going to eat like human beings and not animals. And, you know, we are going to treat each other with respect, and we are going to uphold the law in the manner that we act, as much as see something, say something. That does not mean that everybody is perfect. And forgive the trespasses. Sorry, I'm not great at quoting the Bible, but you know, forgive my brother for his trespasses as I forgive him. I mean, this whole thing of Como case, it doesn't matter what the person's intentions are. Of course it matters. When it bumps you by accident, punch them, they say, oh, excuse me, no worries. They do it on purpose. You know, and throw you in front of a train or something like that. It's a different can of worms. I mean, the logic, this is, I'll look at the synopsis afterwards with the Rittenhouse, how that, but the logic being used, whether in a court of trial, court of law, or in propaganda stuff, is all over the frickin' map. New rule. I mean, boing, 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 boing. I feel like back in one of those, the early, then it was after pinball. That shows you how old I am. But the Pac-Man stuff, my brother, oh gosh, see, that my mom had money for, but for us to go to the movies or something, no. I mean, and they're spending all of this money on all of these, on Foxcroft, which always, this never enough money, always overspending. That's why everybody, I was so exaggerated about the entourage with the Spaniards and the French, and particularly when we bought our house in Madrid. And I was upset that we only had 80% equity to put down, and we still owed. I mean, we actually had 100%. We should have had 100% equity to buy 3 times what we bought if my ex-husband hadn't pulled what he claims that he had pulled. Now, that's my money. And that's another thing and I'm sitting on a $10 billion lawsuit for global expats. That's where my real money, that's what I wanted to get up. That's what I wanted to assure for me and my children. I would have walked away from, what he lost. I wasn't going to get into a fight now. Now everybody's put it on the table as something, as a matter of principle. What went on in my divorce in Spain, I mean, even my sisters still throw that in there. You got to get over your husband. You got to get over your divorce. I'm like, how many times do I have to explain to you idiot women out there and men the same frickin' thing? This has nothing to do. In fact, I'm going to be the only one working to defend and get my ex-husband out of the frickin' mess he's gotten himself into, because you all want to cover up all the corruption and the crap that's going on out there. And that's your only concern. And this goes up to the top of the American, Spanish, and French governments. All 3 are implicated. And I think few people out there are up at the top or near the top are starting to realize what up shit's creek they are without a paddle. And that I'm not the dumb bimbo that everybody wanted to believe. And I am not just because I opted out of their Machiavellian games and I opted out of their workforce, and I was very, very content, for example, with Bogota, to do the manual art stuff with the children and organize that and do nothing else. It was not because I'm not capable of doing anything else. It's because I love to do that. I'm working on my latest. I'm like, oh, you guys, you can't understand anything that's in writing. You can't follow the videos because it's too complex for you. well, let's go back to grade school and I'll start doing my artwork to try and maybe explain, you know, like the Three Little Pigs story. This one is what I'm doing. This is for actually my family. It's John Dickinson, because John Dickinson was, you know, let the United States, the central government be like the sun, and the states, you know, circling around the sun, and that it all works together to maintain the equilibrium. Planets don't shoot off into space or don't crash into the sun, you know, the analogy there. And that's, I put in the family crest. You got so it goes from the Wilcox, you got Paul, there's John Paul Jones, that's Paul crest, and Dickinson crest. Here's Dickinson. My abilities as an artist is rather infantile, and then I've still got my grandfather to do, my father. I'm still finishing this up. The balance of justice, because my grandfather, he was the first white lawyer to successfully defend a Black man in the Deep South, 1910, and then the influence of science and medicine with my father. And then, you know, see the injection of a woman, but a woman who cares about people, who didn't drink the Kool-Aid of the narcissist, who didn't drink the Kool-Aid of that pathological lying women. I mean, I remember when I was 16, I was like, my God, Mom, you're just teaching us how to lie really, really, really well. You know, I can do it. I know how to do it. I was taught by the best. But I was like, I had to lie with her all the time. I mean, even if you didn't do anything wrong, you better make up some sort of story, because she's gonna find something wrong with what you did. You know? So even if you didn't do anything wrong, you better have made up another story that she won't be able to take off into her la-la lands. And you constantly have to be, and this is where the pathological liars get trapped all the time. See, I remember any lies that I say. Now, this, you know, taught me, I mean, when I was young, I was like, but I don't like the feeling, how it makes me feel when I lied to somebody. Now, with her, I don't have any moral, you know, conflict in having lied to her, because if I tell her the truth, she'll start screaming and yelling at me and punish me for nothing. Or make up all sorts of stuff. So, you know, you just, because she lives in her fantasy land, and this is the Victorian era and the queenship and the Nancy Reagans of the world, and Joan Crawford, Mommy Dearest, CZ Guest, Cornelia Guest, the you know, the role model that Foxcroft and the prep schools and the Ivy League schools have set, you know, pretty much from the beginning, and have done a lot of damage to American society. And this is where, you know, the attacking Mary Miller on her Hitler comment of education, you know, molds the children. Hitler was right. Our youth, if we have our youth in our hands, we have the future. And that Hitler was right. He was right. And that's why they attacked her because her enemies were like, oh gosh, she's hitting on the nail there. We don't want that coming out. So we're going to silence her. Just like they did to me. Her husband was attacked as well for having attended Trump's rally before the insurrection. He wasn't at the insurrection. In fact, apparently at her office. So, you know, you're attacking his freedom of speech. Now, I don't know, they're, you know, like Mary Miller and Chris Miller, please come on over to my corner of the ring. Oh God. I was watching the movie Muhammad Ali. It's really good. I forget is it Will Smith, I think, who plays. Really good job. And I have to admit, you know, I wouldn't be able to do those acting like that, and really having the gests and everything down to a pat of how the person's that not everybody can do that. And I wouldn't want to try and do that. I can't stand being up on a stage, but I certainly appreciate the work that goes into that. And I'm Muhammad Ali. Boxing, martial arts. I think I'm not gonna go to a competition, but I'm like, yes, because it's not just beating the shit out of another person. But Muhammad Ali, when he refuses to go to Vietnam, there ain't no Viet Cong killing me, and you guys won't protect my rights here in my country. You think I'm going to go and kill some poor people that I have nothing against? You can stick me in prison. I'm not running away. And he stood up to him. That's what really, for me, what really made Muhammad Ali into a champ. Not any of the because it destroyed his brain. Oh God, the poor man. Really good guy too. So newer socio-political developments such as narratives of fraud in the recent general elections, the emboldening impact of the violent breach of the US Capitol, conditions related to the COVID pandemic, and conspiracy theories promoting violence will almost certainly spur some DVEs to try to engage in violence this year. Okay, first, fraud, narratives of fraud in the recent elections. I haven't followed that. I haven't looked at the evidence. I can't say if those are unsubstantiated or not, but I want to point out to the Democrats, Al Gore was the one that opened the Pandora's box on that one when he contested the presidential election and started, no, we got to recount . So see, both sides of you guys, be careful what you wish for, because we see this time and time again. I think it was, I forget what was some congressional rule where they keep on saying, oh, you're complaining, Democrats are complaining, but that the Republicans are doing it, but you guys started it. Boing, 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 boing. This really is like a Pac-Man game going up on Capitol Hill and in the American government. We always have been the most transparent, and in terms of voting, the United States has always been pretty much above board on that. Whether that is changing is certainly a possibility with all the corruption going on all over the place, and in the normalizing of all of that everywhere. Everybody's normalizing it. You get in with Foxcroft, this I'll get into that, these affinity groups and these coaches and these different presentations that are being put together. Conditions related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, yeah, you guys, basically a shit show. And there's still a lot of questions on, you know, how and why, who's responsible for that pandemic. More and more evidence that it is from a laboratory. I keep on saying, stop with your debating here. How much money is spending on debating on all of this, you experts? This was back in June 2020. So this is, you know, right into the shutdown. And I saw some wacko guys with a podcast. Yeah, it was on I think through Facebook, I remember, with these all sorts of wacko stuff, but not all of it was totally wacko. They'd start with a truth, take it into La La Land. That's what I'm going to read from here on propaganda. You can see this with Rush Limbaugh. You can see it with all of them, extremists on the right or the left. But what was important, what I really remember about that, and I did repost it, was that they were saying that there was like 19 patents. There's a whole slew of patents on COVID because there's variants that were held in the United States by Bill Gates. I was like, ooh. Well, it's real simple to figure that one out. Do these patents exist? That's pretty easy to verify. Any journalist, you know, out there. I haven't ever gone and looked at the patent office, but even, yeah, okay, take me a couple of quite a few more hours to figure that one out rather than the journalist who l'habitude. But it's pretty easy to verify. So, do those patents exist? Is it, or are they, because now we're having different variants, are the variants that we have out there and infected people the exact same thing as the patents? You know, for that, particularly if there's several variants and several patents, I think statistically speaking that would be from nature becomes such a ridiculous possibility that even the most expert of experts would be like, oh yeah, that's just not possible. Pretty much smoking gun. I mean, you don't actually see Bill Gates in the lab taking the stuff and putting it into wherever. But see, this is where all the idiots out there. No, you do not have to have that to show enough evidence, or at least enough evidence to start a full-fledged investigation by a prosecution. You know, I mean, this would probably come under Interpol, but I'm not sure. But they're such a mess. I mean, they're all in bed together and involved in cover-ups and bullshit. And we know this with the FBI, with the and Interpol, with the family courts in crisis. And we've got there's an underground railroad for women with children fleeing for their lives, pursued by Interpol and the FBI. Going to my family courts in crisis, this American woman went to Holland. At least the FBI agents, when they went to talk to the kids, they realized, no, the children hadn't been kidnapped. And they did have a little bit humanity, these guys, of going, well, no, this is not the situation, when they reported back to headquarters. But I think she left out, that woman, a long time ago, because, you know, that set the stage of no, UFBI, we don't care if there's a legitimate, you know, concern of safety for the children or their women. You got a court order. See, there is an opportunity for cross-border cooperation in protecting women's and children's rights, and also in violating women's and children's rights. And it's being used in violating those rights and perpetuating the trafficking of women and children and the abuse of women and children in countries around the world. I mean, and you know, basically because the consulates won't protect the rights of their citizens in foreign countries. You know, basically in the soft diplomacy, it's, we won't spill the beans on you guys if you don't spill the beans on us, and we'll offer up our populations as you know, pawns in the game. And if they get killed, or their property gets seized, or you know, they become targeted of some sort of corruption or some sort of criminal activity, we'll turn a blind eye when your courts sweep it under the carpet. But you do the same with your citizens in our country. And that's basically the agreement between all of the different governments, and why the consulates, you know, just turn a blind eye to the violation of rights of their citizens in foreign borders. I mean, I've been showing that that's policy up and down the State Department, the Ministre des Affaires Étrangères, and all of the different governments. I mean, Calorama I go through, that's all sorts of embassies. The French embassy, the one who got called back, the ambassador's wife, I forget what his name was. I keep on walking by there, I'm like, oh, I should write another letter, except at the time, I think I'm going to do a short one, drop it in their mailbox, like I did the last one. Say, you didn't get it? No, I personally delivered it at the French embassy residence, where I go past every single day. So you didn't get it, you better check with your personnel within the embassy, because I want to see them in court as well. If I address something to you, it better get to you. I mean, with the Chris Miller, the Mary Miller, her staff has been sitting on my letter to her since November 1st, as have all of the other staff from the Tea Party, Liberty, and Freedom Caucuses. There's another one, Constitutional Caucus. I'm like, oh, I got to get to that one as well. See, I'm just establishing the evidence for the courts. I know these kids. They're just going to sit on it. Sure, I'm wasting my time. No, I'm not wasting my time, because I am setting them up for a fall when we get to the courts as the real violent extremists, the ones who are instigating the violence, are all the idiots up on Capitol Hill, and all the idiots all throughout Washington and government agencies are too busy partying and cashing in to do their jobs. Oh, and my favorite is conspiracy theories. Now, basically, anybody who comes out with, it's just a conspiracy theory. Oh, like, could I please have your name, please? I'll put the two clauses in there. Really rank them over the coals. You know, what is it when you stop a soldier? Name, rank, and serial number right now. Cause little buddy, I'm gonna see you in court now, and I'm gonna find out who the hell your wife is and what terrorist cells she's hanging out at the country clubs. Because if you believe that in this city we're living in Camelot, where everybody's working for the good of the people and to uphold democracy and the rule of law and all the other propaganda that they're spouting out there, you need to have your head examined. And I mean, big time. You know, either you should go to a prison or a psychiatric ward. Because if you believe that there are no conspiracies going on here in the Machiavellian land of Washington, D.C., and the American ruling elite, and the British ruling elite, and the French ruling elite, and the Spanish ruling elite, and every other ruling elite across the globe, you're an idiot. Oh, hey, let me sit down and tell you. If you weren't married to a brain dead bonzo who just wants to hang out at a country club and go shopping and buy lots of beauty products so nobody will realize how old she's getting, you might want to rethink that one in the next life. I mean, I left Washington because of the lack of good husband and father material back in the 80s. Just in Washington, up and down the East Coast. In America, amongst the well-educated American ruling elite, which I knew then and I know now are not the gods that they pretend. Most of them are con artists. And that's why I didn't want to have anything to do with them. I did, you know, but see, men should think about that. I did date a couple of guys that I think were of, you know, good intentions, rather than just getting laid or whatever. But you burn enough times, you don't trust anybody. I mean, Foxcroft, this question, I'm like, be careful what you ask because you might not like the answer. I mean, of course, I was on mute. I mean, you have to mute yourself in these things. And they said, what does family mean to you? And I was like, somebody who people who stab you in the back. I was like, oh God, I can't believe you guys just asked that question here. Particularly amongst Foxcroft students and alumni. Oh my Lord. When I got to Foxcroft in the 80s. Well, no, I got there 78 and I arrived there. That's after my British boarding school, who a lot of mothers were a real piece of works as well, and Machiavellian game players. That's why I'm like, I've known this since I was a child. And I promised that I wouldn't become the same backstabbing bitches as all of the mothers around me, and that my classmates and schoolmates complained about as much as I did, and thought they were as crazy as I thought they all were. But most of the people I know drank that Kool-Aid and just repeated the same crap as their parents. I know my sister has, and almost every woman I know. And that's why I'm not liked and I've been canceled, because I make them look bad. But I'm like, no, I don't make anybody look bad. That's not my agenda in my life. My agenda is just trying to live my life as I want, and not, how shall I say, it's just for my material pleasures in life. No, the trajectory of my life, what I believe in, what my convictions are. That's another reason why my children didn't go to the American schools. Because the boarding, the American schools overseas, that is, it's a private system as well, and it's the same prices, same ambiance as the prep schools. Now the lycée français, same can of worms. And I'm like, oh, you lycée français people, for example, Maguelone, Orleans, this one's particularly for you. You're going to have to show in court, because the jurisprudence in my divorce categorizes these schools as reform schools for drug addicts. You got jurisprudence, Cobham and Foxcroft. But what I show is, I'm like, wait a second, lycée français, same can of worms. Now the British, because the lycée français is under the French government, that's the French consulate, that's part of their soft diplomacy, as is d'Alliance Française. Some of you people at the State Department and les Affaires étrangères, le ministre des Affaires étrangères in Paris, you might start listening to this stuff, because it is very pertinent and it's gonna really bite you guys in the ass. My ex-husband comes from a poor family, extremely poor family. So see, he was the social climber and in our marriage, and married the meal ticket. The meal ticket was the society lady. Didn't come with, material wealth, with a dowry, like all of the women of the Gilded Age who were exported to England to inject money into England after it had self-destructed from its predatory expansionism. See how history repeats itself. So no, he saw his meal ticket, and that's another thing that becomes, with my divorce, a matter of principle of excuse me, I made him in what he was. He never would have grappled up the ladder of success in the banking system if it hadn't been for his respectable wife, who was constantly trying to, all by herself, when everybody else around him was a very, very bad influence, trying to say, don't do it, it's going to get you into trouble. Now, my favorite when my marriage was, he'd say, just be positive. And I would always respond, I'm very positive. I'm positive it's going to get you into trouble. And I'm positive I'm going to end up having to clean up the freaking mess. And oh Lord, the doozy of a mess I made this time. And everybody's scurrying around for the past 15 years to try and cover everything up and silence me is just digging the graves deeper. Now, I know everybody's going to come, wow, the scandal that's going to explode when all of this finally comes ahead is going to make the Jeffrey Epstein case look like a piece of, a cakewalk. I'm making a scandal. I shouldn't be making a scandal. I haven't made the scandal here. Not at all. Everybody who's made the scandal here is everybody who's been implicated. And it just adds to the cesspool, providing me more and more evidence in my argumentation against everybody under RICO, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and the Patriot Act. So I don't know. It's incredible what's going on in DC, and that nobody, I'm the only one who seems to be wanting to do anything about it. Oh, everybody's out there bitching. Russell Brand, I listened to him a lot. He's right on the mark. Yeah, well, why are they giving him a voice? Oh, I know. Very intelligent guy. It's a shame. This is actually proof. My Lord, his childhood and everything that he went through. You screw up a kid, and he's going from one dumb bimbo to a next celebrity, and he's all into the celebrity stuff, which is a real shame, because I got with a brain. See, now I'm not all into this tattoo. I mean, I would never have a tattoo. All of this tattoo craze. His physique, yeah, that's not my bag. But he's a smart guy. He knows what he's talking about. So I don't care what he looks like. I mean, okay, I'd be like, well, you might want to look like a little bit more like a gentleman. And yeah. You had a hard life, and I can understand your eccentricity, let's just say, a bit, and wanting to rebel with all of it. But you get to an age where you have to kind of, and that's, 16-year-olds, that's what I expect of them. 17-year-olds, really, this Rittenhouse kid, he my heart goes out to him. To kind of be, I'm going to do this, a hothead. They got their hormones all over the place. That's why, no, my dear. You're not going to do that. And I just thank God that with all of the bad influence that my children have had, and this is going to be a very serious problem for the American government as well, because they have a duty to protect my children. All of the bad influence that they have been surrounded by, and the propaganda and the lies that they have been fed, and the efforts to keep them away from their American heritage. Yeah, State Department, you might want to start preparing yourself for a defense in the courts on that one as well. So see, no, the people who are intransigent, the people who are inciting the violence, inciting the anger, are not the kids and even some adults who are playing into their hand and engaging in that violence. You know, as I say, Rittenhouse kid, you got to give him a little bit of a cut of he said he wanted to go and help. Yeah, he didn't go there as and I'm sure, oh, well, here, you better take, you know, a weapon in case you get, because you're going into a violent and potentially, you know, life-threatening situation. Now, you know, as I said, it's not gonna I see any kind of gun or anything like that. Like in Bogota, whip around the corner, some guy. No, he's running, and two police officers follow him with their guns pulled. Everybody's following them down the street to find out what's going on. I go around the corner, I see those guns out. I'm like, I don't want to be anywhere in the vicinity. Guns start shooting. I want to make, I mean, of course, this was downtown. I wouldn't be there with my children. Same thing when I'm living in Paris. The trash cans in the street, when there were bombs going off all the time. A friend of ours was had gone through the Paris's c'est quoi le métro central, j'oublie. But there was a bomb there, and his train had just passed after that bomb had gone off. And luck of God, he wasn't killed. Same thing happened to my, you know, ex-husband at the bombing at El Nogal in Bogota. That's why, you know, Americans who 9/11 was the day that changed the world. I'm like, excuse me, when that happened, I was in Bogota. I remember my bodyguard, I was riding my horse, and my bodyguard comes in. I mean, it was into the club. He usually wouldn't, they weren't allowing them. Oh God, that whole thing really pissed me off. But anyway, and you know, he's like, your husband's on the phone. I'm like, what? He's like, oh God, you know, it was the bombing. I was like, oh my God. But I mean, what do you want me to do? You know, I was like, we've been living with this stuff in Europe forever. And we live on a day, I mean, I walk around with a freaking bodyguard and in a bulletproof car. Fundamentally for the same reasons. So this whole thing of, you know, the egocentricity of Americans about 9/11 and how this was the attack of the millennium. I'm like, see, this is just one of the reasons why everybody hates sheriffs so much. And the soft diplomacy of the State Department is bullshit. The only thing that the soft diplomacy of the State Department does is provide a lot of parties and social awareness campaigns and cultural exchange parties for the consular people and their families, and or the, you know, the embassy, and which is the consulate as well, people to schmooze with the local ruling elite and collude with them to maintain the corruption in the country. Now, this is all over the map with Ann Peterson in Bogota, as well as the French government. Ann Peterson should ask her sons about my conversation with them I forget when this would have been, 2000. This was, after 2009. Her eldest son was married to a friend of my brother's girlfriend, Philippine. This little girl was known as my brother's girlfriend. I'm sure the reason that he married her, same reason my brother is with this Philippine bimbo. He was unfaithful. So they've since gotten a divorce. At our Deo restaurant, ask your son about that one. Then ask your husband, David Patterson, about my question in Bogota when he did his presentation on the his expertise with the Sunni and Shiite factions. My question was, well, this is all very informative, sir, but will these people ever learn to live together? And he responded, that's what we'll see. And my question at the American Embassy, when the American State Department in Bogota, when the American State Department was doing his presentation on Plan Colombia and trying to sell the propaganda about how their spraying was not doing any damage to the local crops or the local people or the livestock. Didn't buy that one for a second. Now everybody else drank the Kool-Aid, but I stood up and I said, all well and good to get rid of drug production unless you deal with the consumption problem. It'll just keep on popping out elsewhere. Now, see, one of the reasons why I didn't want my kids to go to the American school in Bogota was because I knew about the drug consumption problem there. Elevated compared to the French. I'm not really sure with the Spanish, but that wasn't a very good school. That wasn't an option. So, the hypocrisy of the American ruling elite and French and Spanish and British, everybody else needs to stop, because the name of the game has just been the minorities are just trying to get in to the social climbing game and grapple up the ladder of success and cash in. And it is having extremely, dire consequences on rule of law, level perception, diligence. The professions across the board are at 70 to 90% failure rates, whereas you've got 85% cronyism rates in your hiring and promotional practices. Now, a lot of that is from affirmative action. So what they do, and you see everywhere across the board, I got so many examples. Anybody who is, investigated is absolved and then given a promotion. So, gives the appearance of them being totally, above board, which is contrary. And the whistleblowers are ousted. I mean, this is everywhere. And this is how all of these different bullying factions, white, brown, black, LGBT, feminist, male supremacists, because that's the old guard. So, you have this group over here. Problem is, the old guard still has, because they've been playing this game since the 1960s of, we're going to take back power and control, and we're going to have the rise of the Fourth Reich, and we'll have the Fourth Reich. And that's where we are today. And, they have been successful, I have to say. everything I look through, I'm like, yeah, that's what you should have done. That's what you should have done. And you did a good job of it. And you've produced cacophony every place that you're going. And the left, under the Kennedys, you can't point your finger at just one group, because, so I keep on saying, it's like a class of kindergarten children. And I walked in and they're each pointing their finger at each other. And I said, I know it's everybody here. And everybody either is going to get busy cleaning this up, or you can sit in the corner there on a timeout if you don't behave. See, that's what a queen does, or a king. So propaganda, then I'll kind of wrap up, because I wanted to get into it was particularly this bias presentation on biases that we have, and trying to explain biases to people. But first, propaganda, again, from the rise of the Fourth Reich. One tool of public control, quickly understood and well utilized by the Nazis of the Third Reich, was propaganda. And even the definition of commonly used words can change. Many will remember that gay meant happy. I think even my father, like in the beginning, is gay. Oh, is he happy? Like, oh no. So I gotta remember where that change came in. The 1952 edition of the New Webster Encyclopedia Dictionary of the English Language defined propaganda as the dissemination and the defense of beliefs, opinions, or actions deemed salutary to the program of a particular group. The propagation of doctrines and tenets of special interest as an effort to give credence to information partially or wholly fallacious. A more diligent definition was given in the 1996 edition of the Reader's Digest Oxford Complete Word Finder, which merely stated it was an organized program of publicity, selected information, etc., used to propagate a doctrine, practice, etc. So where the definition of propaganda once included allegations and false information, today it is just organized and select information of the type seen in the mass media. See, it is extremely important to define, words, complex concepts, ideologies, and define those before you have an actual discussion amongst people on that issue, and that everybody is on board of exactly what it is that you're talking about, rather than everybody throwing in their own definition of what they believe the subject matter is. I'm constantly pulling people out on this one. Wait a second. Can you define, your diversity, inclusion? Give me a definition of how you are defining what you're propagating, your propaganda, your ideology. Then we can have a discussion, because you and Webster don't agree, and you and most of the rest of the world don't agree. You're coming up with your new dictionary there. This is why it is so important in the cacophony and the new rule game that everybody, all of these little ladies are playing, that you first set the definition of what the discussion is about. A noteworthy component of propaganda is not just false or spun information, but the omission of critical material that is essential to enable the reader or viewer to place the presented information in a meaningful context. I'm going to get into the example. Critics see the single greatest failing of the modern corporate mass media as that while it daily bombards its audience with facts, figures, and statistics, it rarely attempts to bring coherence or meaning to this data. See, with all the stress, I do have a little bit of dyslexia. This didn't used to happen to me when I was young. The media may not always be able to tell us what to think, but they are strikingly successful in telling us what to think about. Stated media critic Michael Parenti. Parenti, that's gotta be Italian. Many people complain that the major media are superficial, conformist, and subjective in their selection of news. Yeah. And they need to be held to account. They are not news organizations. They're propaganda producing organizations. I got the same beef with the media in Europe. And the Spanish monarchy, particularly because that's in the Constitution, their ability, and I tell them their obligation, because that's part of their job, but their ability, that's one of their jobs, is to assure that the forms of mass communication, because see, by the time that the Spanish Constitution come in, you had already gone through Franco and had gone through all of this. And with the Spanish ruling elite, I mean, they got their rise at the Fourth Reich there, at the Franquista Fourth Reich, and it's the same. In fact, I show this with the Dewan family, who she's in Baltimore. She's old guard. Her family was a Franquista. My ex-husband, both his grandfathers were on the losing side of the Spanish Civil War. One was an anarchist. What I learned is, violent old coot. Anarchists, they have no political convictions. They just, they want everything for themselves. And the other was a communist who did have some political convictions. At the end said, yeah, you communists are just as full as it is all the rest of them. That's another thing. Anytime one, you're a communist, you're a socialist. First, if you ever listen to anything I say or anything that I write, and second, we need to have a little discussion on what your definition of a communist is or a socialist before we can even progress to any kind of, logical conversation. I mean, my mother is, you talk about your anti-communist, and the little ladies of the Red Scare, she's a little bit after that, but she was just following the lead of the ladies in that. See, the whole thing with the Red Scare and the Americans' obsession with anti-communism is coming from the alt-right ladies who just are afraid They're not going to be able to go shopping anymore like they used to and have lots and lots of money to go shopping. That's all they hear. Wait a second, you're going to stop our money flow for all of this shopping that we want to do and spend? Oh, you're a communist. See, that is what led the ideology that led to the Red Scare. Because that's not what Karl Marx was about. And Karl Marx wasn't advocating anything. It was saying this is how it's going to go down. I mean, how many times did I try and explain that to, my mother, anyone in my entourage? It's not rocket science. And in fact, if they knew how to have a real discussion of their brains, I would be like, well, wait a second. Oh, Dad, come on in here. You're the only one in this place who has any brains. Dad, actually, what you've always been telling me is what Karl Marx is saying. It's communism. See, the poor man, he was. I mean, this is where keep the cacophony, and he and I couldn't have any kind of intellectual or any, decent conversation. This is where with Joan Meyer and everybody about perinatal alienation syndrome. Does it exist? Does it not exist? They're having a discussion on the existence of something when they can't even come to an agreement on the definition. And wasting how much money in the back and how many lives? She's GW. So, it's important to have the definition, but everything that's going on, all of these think tanks, all of these social media campaigns, all of these affinity groups, I'll get into that. All of these things, it is bullshit propaganda of one faction or another. That's why I keep on saying, I don't have an NGO. I do not look for any kind of money. I will end up living on the street in a tent before I will sell my soul. So if that's God's plan, that's God's plan. Hope not. I really don't relish the thought. Believe me. I don't even like going camping overnight, So I like my showers. I like, this is another thing. I'm fighting the industrialists, but I do recognize that the Industrial Revolution has produced enough technology and infrastructure to provide clean water, running water, heat, the basic necessities that every single person has the right to on the planet. And we do have the technology to now provide that. So that's how I come to my forgiveness of God, if you want to put it that way, of all the cacophony and the exploitation of workers and exploitation and human rights violations and atrocities that have been committed during and because of the Industrial Revolution. I guess there were lessons to be learned. I'm hoping, maybe somebody will learn those. But it has provided us now with enough technology if we stop having a ruling elite who just wants to go and live on Mars and have their own private space rockets. instead of just their own private jets. And that's their objective in life. So, you know, we're at the crossroads where we decide, are we going to follow the trickle down, a la Nancy Reagan, a la Joan Crawford, a la my mother, a la Cornelia Guest, all of the you know, a la the prep schools and Ivy League frat schools that are at the lead? Or is it, which is what the rhetoric is, equality, justice, democracy? I mean, they all got the rhetoric. It's just that they're colluding with their backstabbing bitchery behind closed doors to assure that that's never implemented. Okay, I'm going to jump over this. Much of what is reported as news is little more than the uncritical transmission of official opinions to an unsuspecting public. Oh God, one of my pet peeves is Dana Bash going, I'm Dana Bash and I'm here to opine. I don't do a very good imitation of her voice. But when she comes out there, I'm the expert here to opine. Oh, when I started hearing about, got back to the States and saw what an explosive industry 24/7 news had become, with a bunch of cackling hens and prick roosters sitting up on podiums opining about stuff that they had no knowledge about whatsoever. Incredible. Incredible the quantity of resources that are being wasted there. With the agrarian community, please wake up and smell the coffee. Because whether you think you're mainly with the Republicans, but even if you're with the Democrats, you're in bed with the enemy. Bring back manufacturing jobs to America, which are car industry. I'm just listening to something about the microchip. What we're facing a serious crisis with that thing. And Taiwan, I listen at China and Taiwan and these big wig experts in DC. Their head where the sun don't shine for the past 40 years of whether we're going to end up in a nuclear war with China, whether Taiwan is worth the pawn in the game, because basically what China wants is control of the region, if not world. Of course, that's what I keep on saying. And the World Bank people are in bed and on that entire agenda, as is the international development community in Washington, colluding to, as I say, the Asians are for their region, the Latinos, Brazil's at the lead, the Africans, South Africa is at the lead. The immigrant problems in Washington, in the United States, the immigrants that I want to see rounded up and kicked out, all the ones in the think tanks and IMF, World Bank, UN, con artists, and who have just been cashing in for decades and decades and decades and laughing all the way to the bank. They, their wives, and their children. I mean, IMF, World Bank, the Family Association, Staff Association, and entire staff, HR department, as well as the Civil Service Organization, people over at the World Bank and their HR department and World Bank Family Network. All of these people have wanted to play hardball with the rich, white, deposed trophy wife for the past 13 years. Really, when you pick a fight with somebody, so you want to come into upper echelons and with the big boys and the top of the heap, one of the first rules that a lady learns, if not a gentleman, you pick a fight with somebody, you damn well better figure out who and what you are taking on before you go out there in the ring. Because if you think your enemy is a lightweight, and all of a sudden you got a giant Goliath or a Muhammad Ali or somebody like that, and you're some skinny little kid, you won't even make it 1 second before you're thrown to the ground. So, everybody has been spitting on me and laughing, ha 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 ha. And picking fights with me and picking fights with me and picking fights with me. And I won't engage. I'm like, okay, fine. You're not going to break me. You're not going to destroy me and get me to commit suicide, like I know some of you guys want. You might get me out on the street, homeless shelters for a while. But guess what? If that happens, we will have violence in the street, and you will have raping and pillaging in your neighborhoods, and we will end up at the same point with the Nuremberg trials too. There will just have been a lot more dead people, a lot more damages, and a lot more angry people looking for your head. I'm lucky, they'll listen to me and I'll say, no, they need to be tried. They need to explain their actions under the law and to be held to account. But every single person has the right to a trial. Now, that's been accused of an actual crime, not just some imaginary slight. Oh, he offended me. He offended me. Poor little old May. Good. The Como one really hit me. Oh, the feminists are out of control. So Hitler understood propaganda intuitively. He wrote in Mein Kampf, one started out with the very correct assumption that in the size of the lie, there was always contained a certain factor of credibility. Since the great masses of people may fall victims to a greater lie rather than a small one, since they themselves also lie, sometimes in little things, but would certainly be too ashamed to tell a great lie. Thus, it would not enter their heads to tell a great lie. And they would not believe the others could tell such an infamous lie. Indeed, they will doubt and hesitate. Even after learning the truth, they will continue to think there must be some other explanation. Therefore, for this reason, some part of the most imprudent lie will remain and stick. A fact which all great lying artists and societies of this world would only too well, and therefore villainously, would know only too well, and therefore villainously employ. Hitler was stating that most people are honest and would never tell a great lie. Therefore, it is hard for them to believe that anyone, especially an admitted leader, would tell one. This presents a great weapon to unprincipled officials. Here, for example, during the Nuremberg trials, Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring explained how to persuade the public to go to war. He told one of his interrogators, "Why, of course the people don't want war. That is understood. But after all, it is the leaders of the country who determine the policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it is a democracy or a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is to tell them they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger." Conspiracy researchers believe that methodology has been used on the American public. Of course it has. As I say, you got to give people credit where credit is due. Who's been setting this up during my lifetime has done a good job. So I'm going to briefly get into this whole bias. It was at the presentation for the alumni of Foxcroft, but they went in, the people doing the presentation got on my radar. This is just like the Winters group. I'm going to be checking into them. But they were talking about biases. So they did this, it's a psychological testing. You see this often. So they showed us these images. They said, okay, it had a table, 1, 2, and 3 columns. And number 1, number 2, number 3 in white. And they said, okay, the numbers of the colors of the numbers will change, and read off what you're seeing. And so underneath on the columns, you had brown, green, blue written, and then that was the color of the image. I'm like, wait a second, what are we doing here? So I was like, well, this has got to be a trick question. So I said, well, you said that the colors of the numbers would change, but that never changed. That was white. So I stopped reading. I'm like, okay. Then it went into a second series, and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, this was what I thought it was. So it comes in with the seconds, but then you have like brown, but you see the yellow image. Blue, you see green. Yellow, but you see red. So of course, at least my mind went to the word that I was seeing, not the color that I was seeing. So right away, I'm like, wait a second, my mind's getting too confused here. I'm getting two conflicting messages at the same time. Boom, 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 boom. Of course, if I had time, I would be like, okay, well then that. But the whole thing, this is, and that's the point of the exercise. It's coming at you rapidly. But then he was using this as an explanation to, biases. And because it was basically pro-Black, this whole presentation. And I didn't go, because I said, well, of course, that's not a bias. That's where mixing apples and oranges. that exercise had nothing to do with biases, because I didn't have a bias. It wasn't based on biases. This was based on the ability of my brain to assimilate two conflicting messages that are coming at me, and simple messages. I mean, and that's, you know, when you do a psychological test, that's what you want to do, is get these simple things, and then you extrapolate it towards, you know, this is where if you get into to complex ideologies or complex situations, how your brain is functioning and assimilating on in a subconscious level. So it had nothing to do with biases, but that's what they were promoting. And this is, you know, all of these coaches. I saw, you know, this was a training course, free webinar about how to becoming a coach. Oh, it was very informative. Now I know this, but see, she's trying to sell me something. I'm out there gathering evidence. It's gonna be, because it's a whole pyramid stuff, and she explained exactly how it's working and how it's all money, 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 money. So anyway, I'll leave it for there today. And see you all perhaps tomorrow. See what I get to.